Hi, I'm Victoria Farrow, Associate Professor at Birmingham City University. I'm an architect. I'm also course director for the BA Architecture programme at the Birmingham School of Architecture and Design. I've been there for the last 6 years, and this is a student's perspective.
Hi, I'm Brenna, and you're watching A Student's Perspective. Today I'm here with Victoria Farrow, Program Director at Birmingham City School of Architecture and Design. If you like our conversation, please like, share, and feel free to post questions. Okay. All right. Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much for being here and talking with us today. Can we just start out by having you give an introduction of yourself, a little background, and just a little bit about yourself?
Wow. Yes, I'm an architect first and foremost. That is how I'm also an educator. I grew up in Hull, which is in the north of England. I started my training as an architect at the University of Nottingham, where I spent 7 years studying architecture there and also working in practice. I then began to discover a passion for teaching. When I was at the school as a student, I started to mentor some of the younger students. And in around 2009, I was invited, quite ad hoc actually, to the University of Lincoln to do some student reviews. At that point in time, I was running my own practice and I was working a little bit for a practice in Nottingham as well. And I was finding it okay. When I do the interviews at the University of Lincoln with second and third year students, I absolutely loved it. And it made me want to teach, just my passion for teaching. So I pursued that. I began teaching a third year unit at University of Lincoln, and I also applied for positions at Nottingham Trent University, where I started to build my career in architectural education. I think my passion for teaching architectural education came from some of my own experiences. I became fiercely passionate about to improve students, making it enjoyable, something fun, something that they could really fall in love with. Because some part of my training is not like that. And so I became this kind of, I became very passionate about any teaching I delivered would be just very enjoyable. So I spent 5 or 6 years teaching at Nottingham University at various different levels, different courses, both postgraduate and graduate. And then I moved to Birmingham University. So in 2014, I applied for the role as course director at Birmingham City University, and I used that as a stone to kind of advance my career, but also to step into a position where I could have more influence on architectural education, running a course a year. I've been running first year in Nottingham Trent, and had the opportunity to write. In fact, I joined Birmingham City University, and the opportunity, which was fantastic for me. And I still, I suppose, alongside my teaching career and my career as an architect, been working with the Association of Architectural Educators. That represents architectural educators in the UK. It was very much inspired by the National Conference Beginning Student, which is America, which you'll be very aware of, and set up in 2011, 2012. So I've held great pride and been part of that to come together and for about share ideas, give educators and architects the opportunity to share that.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's interesting and very important for like students to know that, you know, you might go to school for architecture, and although you still are an architect and you have like the passion for architecture, you directed it in a different way that maybe you ever thought you were. Like, did you growing up want to be a teacher or a professor in any way, or is it just, you know, that passion of architecture led you that way?
Yeah, no, I never thought that I would teach. When I was growing up, I thought I'd be an artist. That's what I wanted to be. I wanted to paint. And my parents told me that I needed to get a more solid career. My dad is an architect. So when I was filling in my forms for university, he suggested, why don't you do architecture? I had never thought about it before. And I just wrote it down on the form and off it went. And then I got a place at university and I thought, oh, right, this is what we're doing. And I suppose it was on the course that I discovered my love and my passion for architecture and design. That was something that evolved. It wasn't something that came naturally on day one. Actually, I found the transition from art to architecture quite challenging. Mm-hmm. Different at the beginning when you start to kind of learn architecture. It feels very different. I suppose later in my career, I've seen many more parallels between art and architecture as I've matured in my understanding of both disciplines. But no, my path was, my thinking was I would be, you know, do my training as an architect, become an architect, set up my own practice one day, and that would be what I would do. And I suppose when you reflect back, when you come out the other side of your training to become an architect and you think back, you know, oh, that didn't work so well for me, or I wish I'd have done this on my course, or I wish I'd had a teacher like that. And then you're given the opportunity to do that, to be that person, to help students through challenges that you faced. It's a gift, and I never found when I left my job in teaching at the end of the day that I ever had anything but a big smile on my face, and I realized I'd just found, I suppose, what I was supposed to do. It was not something chosen, it was just something that organically developed.
Yeah, I really like that, the way you said that, like you want to be the professor or teacher that you never had. And I think your students probably really appreciate that. And you probably connect with them a little bit differently than maybe someone else. And, you know, this led to you, you know, accomplishing things that you probably never have, you know, would have as just being an architect, like the AAE, like you said. You know, how did the AAE come into fruition? Like, how did you start that? Was it like you noticed that it was lacking and you wanted to start it?
I mean, there was a group of about 4 or 5 educators from different institutions. I suppose conversations with me started in around 2011 when I got the opportunity to go to the conference, the national conference of the beginning design students. That one was the one hosted in Nebraska. which was the most incredible experience for me. I'd never been to that part of America before. And suddenly I was exposed to all of these different professors teaching architecture in different ways. And I've still got a book actually over there. And I thought it was fantastic that educators could get together and talk and share, what projects they'd been doing with students. And my experience at the same time in that it was quite closed. There wasn't as much sharing, there wasn't as much discussion about what was happening in different institutions or different schools of architecture. You got to see the end result, the degree show, at every kind of grad show in around June, but you didn't get that to how different courses were being delivered other than what you could see on the website. So I found it really fantastic that this conference in America was showcasing project practice, the way that education was been delivered in architecture, and really inspiring. And the colleague that I travelled with was very passionate about setting up this group. And so on our return, we had the meeting with the other 4 or 5 academics, including Professor Vowles, who is the vice chair of the AAE now. I think at the time we had no idea really what it was going to be. We just knew that we wanted to do something, and we set the aims of the association clearly from the beginning, wanting to develop and support and practice learn architectural education, wanting to foster a dialogue between AAE and students. And employers in educational life, and to encourage and research scholarship of teaching and learning, and then promote kind of richness in architectural education. So from those aims, we decided we would push to run a conference, an annual conference, echoing the National Conference for the Beginning Design Student. We wanted to do a journal, so publications coming out of those conferences so that we could share more widely the conversations, the papers, the research that had come out of our conferences. And so far it's been really successful. I organised and hosted the first conference in 2013 myself, and since then managed to organise and host a conference every year. The AA and it really has gathered much more than I ever at the beginning. A really fantastic network.
Yeah, I think that it's really great, and to promote that conversation between people and students, and just bring everyone together within the architecture field and just promote learning. I just think it's a really great message. You mentioned traveling, how you went to Nebraska. Do you think that, traveling throughout these different places has shaped who you are as an architect and as a professor?
Oh, yes. I think the last few years of my career at Birmingham City University, I've been quite grounded. I haven't been able to do as much because I've been so busy. But certainly in my earlier career, having that, the exposure to different places, but also being able to teach in different institutions, different places in America. And I've come over and spent some time on on your programs, doing a little bit of teaching and reviews, and having the experience of different places has been so inspiring to not just my teaching, my kind of designs as well. And I talk about it in the studio with my students a lot. It kind of comes into the lectures that I deliver. The first few travels that I had to America, I made a focus of going to a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright buildings. I suppose that first trip to Nebraska, I got the opportunity to go and see Falling Water, which was really the start of my passion for traveling and seeing the architecture up close and personal and been able to touch it. And I made sure that every single trip that I did to the States, that I would feature a kind of tour of a variety of different architectural wonders, and absolutely loved it. And it certainly shaped me as an educator and a designer.
Being that you've taught at different schools around the world, do you think what are some differences that you've noticed with architecture school, or do you think it's architecture school is architecture school wherever you are?
I think differences would come out probably in the facilities. I think the facilities in the schools in America are fantastic. You have amazing studios. The schools in the UK have amazing facilities, but they're shared across many more students. So I suppose that would be one of the biggest differences that stood out to me coming over. In terms of the challenges faced by staff and students, I suppose they're very similar. Architectural education, whether it's delivered in any country, really, I think the challenges the students face in terms of stress levels and it being a hard discipline to learn, and they've all come out in conversations, and certainly conversations that I've had with academics in different countries on different programs, we echo thoughts. So I think wherever you are, architectural education is quite similar.
So are you practicing right now, or are you solely, being a professor and administrator?
I haven't practiced run my own project for about 2 years now. I have just been so busy running the Birmingham City University, and I also have been focusing on building a kind of second network, I suppose, which is BIM Birmingham, which was established in around, I think it was 2016. I did the first project. It was built off the back of AAE, and it's a shared staff and student conference where students are very much in the setup, the running, the marketing, even building funding, in order to set up and create a conference focused on BIM, building information. So that's taken a lot of my time, and also I accepted the role of becoming associate professor 2 years ago as well. So that also took the other portion of my time away. But I hope to go back to actually in the future. I do hope to return back and start to get back involved with the profession a bit more.
Yeah, so you mentioned the BIM in Birmingham. I think it's a really cool experience for students because, it gives them a real life experience rather than, all these fictional projects that we sometimes get. So it's really interesting and good that they get that real life experience before they leave their school. Yeah. And I even know that here at Maryland got to attend BIM a couple of years or last year. And I think that's cool that you involve people from, around the world and to share their experiences.
One of the biggest or best piece of advice I could give a student on both and also when education is to build networks. Networks have been so crucial to my career, and I didn't realize how important they would be. The networks that I built through the AAE, through my contacts with professors across the world, they have been a really integral part of projects in the present and going into the future. The BIM in Birmingham series of events certainly having contacts in industry that I'd built up through working in practice, and contacts in different institutions across the UK and across the world, been able to get in touch with educators who were perhaps, similarly passionate, working with students and supportive of me. It has just been so crucially important to help me to develop these projects. And you picked up on the kind of the experiences for the students in BIM in Birmingham. And I think that's been very much been led by them. The first event, I had them very much, they were just supportive students giving me a hand. And as the event has grown from 2016 to 2020, they became much more, and they to have a real piece in what they wanted to do, what could help them when they go into industry. So some learned skills in marketing, some learned skills in graphics, in raising sponsorship. And so we've really worked together, and the event has grown to become almost an educational tool that sits next to the course that can get involved with, build new skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've talked about all these different areas, so like BIM and being a practicing architect, and I know that you've worked in different areas of architecture. Can you talk about your experiences in those different areas, and maybe if you have a favorite of those or dislike any, but your experience in like architecture, interior architecture, digital media, those modeling programs?
Yeah, a variety of different. I've taught in architectural technology, interior architecture, interior design, architecture. Even did a little bit of set design and theatre design. I think my passion always ends up residing with architecture. I think purely because I'm a student of architecture, or I was a student of architecture myself. I love teaching any kind of design. I really enjoy working with students and going through that process, which isn't always smooth. Sometimes it's really challenging and there are bumps, but working from the sketch stage all the way to realizing that final output that a student can stand up in front of and be really proud of. I kind of have enjoyed that in each one of the disciplines. I suppose that's passion for architecture. And if I was to filter or divide out, teaching architecture, I have this love for teaching first year, the beginning design students. I think it's a fascinating time when a student from any background, be it more maths or science or arts, steps onto that journey to start to learn architecture. It's a very nerve-wracking experience, and observing them start to find their feet, and start to gain confidence and start to understand what they're doing and be able to produce the drawings that they're proud of. I think first year is one of the most incredible journeys to observe, and I'm really lucky to have been able to hold my position first year for so long. It's a real joy. Not to say that I don't enjoy going into my second and third year studios and seeing what they're doing. I like having that higher level conversation sometimes, but for me, there's that kind of initial first experience with architecture last year.
Yeah, it's probably really rewarding as a professor to, build that foundation for the first year students and then check back in with them throughout their years and their final year and see how they've progressed, because, you built that foundation for them, and to see.
Yeah, just I had a Teams call for my third years. Now, because of the pandemic, I'm not seeing them in the corridor or in the studio, where I would normally be kind of checking in. But we had a Teams. It was just so lovely to see them all. But in my mind, they're still first years. I still see them as they're final year and about to exit the course. Yeah.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask you how we have dealt with, the pandemic and school here in the US, but I wanted to know how over in the UK and in a current lockdown, how you guys are dealing with that and what strategies you guys are using.
Yeah, we locked. It was announced to us on a Tuesday, March. I can't remember the exact date. I think it was Tuesday the 20-something. And we're teaching virtually by the Thursday. So it took us a very stressful Wednesday of meetings and working with amazing, coming up with strategies for how are we going to deliver this. I think one of the decisions that we made on those Wednesday meetings was we are going to get our graduates through. That was the goal. We wanted to make sure that our third years finished and they finished with good results. So everything became focused on that. And we flicked very quickly into virtual teaching, despite the fact that I think in architectural education, there's maybe been a resistance to what's work more virtually for this. Now we've been forced into this position where we have to, and actually we're discovering some positives. Last year, well, I suppose not last year, this year, we embarked on doing virtual crits, virtual reviews with the students. They were really successful. We were able to invite some of your professors from Marywood. We had Stephen and Kate join us on those reviews. We had China, from France, from Italy. So that was a really positive experience that came out of the pandemic. And we've had a variety of competitions that we've set up for the students to keep the motivation going. We had an amazing grad show, virtual grad show, where we had over 15,000 views, which we get in physical. So there's been some positives, but it's obviously been really challenging, and we're managing day to day, keeping staff and students to see how they're feeling and trying to respond and react as we need to in order to just keep that motivation going. I'm sure, like you, it's kind of hard sometimes when you're not in studio to find that motivation.
Yeah, definitely.
But we're teaching face-to-face 50% of the time at the moment. So we're doing half virtual and half face-to-face. So we do get to see them now.
I think it's interesting how there's such a resistance, because even with me and my peers, it's kind of weird that we're not in studio, but yet we have these online tools, especially as architecture students, as opposed to, a different major. We know how to use our laptops and our computers. We have all these programs that allow us to do it, but there's something about learning architecture in person that's different. But you mentioned there are some positives that have come out of it, but there's still that thing that's missing, that personal touch to architecture.
I think being able to come into contact with the paper, draw, and when you're teaching, it's very difficult to work over a screen and not hold the student's pencil and draw out what or kind of look at a model and physically alter it in order to communicate, kind of variation on the idea. I think we're very hands-on architects and designers, and having that stripped from us is really challenging. Although I think virtual's brought loads of positives, and positives that we should keep going, such as the virtual reviews, and being able to have academics from around the world comment on students' work. That's a really exciting possibility. But I don't think we will ever replace that physical nature of studio, being able to pin up and draw and physically make things. It is such an essential part of what we do.
Yeah, definitely. So you talked about what inspires you as a professor, helping students, but when you're practicing architecture, what are some things that inspire you? I know that you mentioned you made it a point to visit different architecture, monuments in different places and Frank Lloyd Wright, but, personally, is there something that stands out and always inspires you?
It depends. Project is and scope of the project. I've worked on projects that are the kind of scale of hotels. So in those projects, you're dealing with not really a kind of client, you're dealing with a group. And so your, I suppose, emotional connection with that client or group is less. It's less to be on that, and it's much more a kind of pragmatic response to the brief. My favourite when I'm working and practicing is working on smaller projects where there's a client that I can meet with, understand their needs and what they really want from the project. Something as small as an extension or a small house. I get a lot of joy with working with the client and being sort of driven by delivering something that they're going to be really happy living inside. So I suppose I'm not an architect that looks for, big, huge projects that are going to get lots of glory. I get more joy from the smaller ones that are going to give a family a space that they absolutely love to live in. And I suppose when I'm designing, looking at other works always inspires me. I always find that helps me get over a designer's block, just sitting, reading, looking at examples, reading how other architects have kind of tackled similar challenges, watching programs. I always think that time away from the design board is as useful as when you're sitting and trying to work. You get so many ideas and build up so many ideas. And then working with colleagues is just key. You can't work I can't work just in my own mind. I have to talk to others, say, hey, what do you think of this? Great. And then go back to my process. And also the science is absolutely key. I just was thinking of a project then that kind of made me think about this.
Yeah. So you think you're the type of person that looks for the personal level in a project rather than, just a disconnect and things like that. But especially since you have your own practice or had, I don't know, it might be a little bit easier for you to, get your hands on it and, feel that personal level of your client rather than, working for an extremely large company and, just getting lost into it. And you don't feel that. And a lot of times that feeling and emotion is what inspires you as a designer.
Yeah.
So we talked about how you went through school and then as a practicing architect and now as a professor, and now you're getting into more of the administration of the university. Is that correct?
I'm still teaching with first years and in third and second year reviews. My role is very varied at the moment. It's sort of grown. I'm associate professor for marketing and recruitment, so that has given me the opportunity to start to look at how courses are marketed and work with the other courses that we have. The architecture and design is made up of BA programs, interior architecture, landscape architecture, product and furniture design, design for future, which is a new course, foundation, and then we have a variety of different postgraduate courses as well that sort of follow on from the undergraduate courses. So my role as associate professor enables me to have an overview of these courses and how they're kind of marketed and get involved in writing new courses, which has been a fantastic experience for me. I was involved in writing the foundation course. One of the courses I'm currently involved with writing is in sports shoe design. Loving. I suppose I have that role, and then my teaching role, and then as a course director, program director, there's a lot of administration, but the sort of, you also get that hands-on with the students too, because you are, I suppose, the manager on, so still come to you in all levels. So I like that part of the role.
Yeah. So do you, with all the information and knowledge you have now, do you think there's something that you would want to tell your student self or any other student out there?
So much. So much. I wish I had worried less. I was a very anxious student in my undergraduate. I worried so much about knowing everything, trying to know everything before I made. I wish I'd had to enjoy it, to be less anxious about declaring my ideas, because I think there's potential in any kind of small sketch or small model, and I think a lot of my students are nervous about showing a sketch. They don't think it's very good, or showing a model, or talking about an idea, and I think that was me. I could associate with that as a student, and I would just say, be proud of your creation you come up with, and work with your tutor who has the same goal as you, which is to help you do well, be confident in who you are as a kind of student designer.
I think that's really good advice, because I know I can relate, and along with many other students, it's just your work. I think you display your work better with confidence, and in almost any field I can think of, it's better to be confident. You just look more presentable, and it helps so much. Confidence, I think, is an advice anyone can take. I think it's great. But all right. So how can our viewers, find you on social media or any websites, or if they're interested in the AAE or anything else that you do?
Yes, AAE, which I can send you. So on Twitter, which is @ArchEducate for the AAE. BIM Birmingham has Twitter and an page. My personal account is Archie Runner on Instagram. I'm happy to find me there. It's mostly shoes, because I'm a long distance runner. So trainers that I've been posting on there. And then I also have my email address, which is farrow.ac.uk. And I'd welcome any emails or questions from anyone. Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much, Victoria, for taking the time to talk with us today. That's it for this episode, but tune in next week for another conversation, and that's a student's perspective.